Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another lovely chat with Barry and I. Hope you're all doing well. So we were thinking today we're going to be talking about healthy interdependence within relationships.
Yes.
And what that is we're not talking about dependency. You know, we all know what dependent is. When you're dependent, it's like you can't make a move without checking with your partner. You're sort of out of reference. Everything is based on somebody else's, opinion of you, feelings, things like that. So that's that dependent. You're dependent on the other for support and for whatever it is in your relationship. And then on the other end of that is when we are hyper independent. And I was saying to Barry earlier that I've noticed a lot with a lot of my clients, especially it seems to be with women, that they either grew up in a narcissistic environment, so therefore, there is some sort of blockage there about being rejected, about having needs and being rejected on them, or they were shamed for being too needy. And that was certainly the case in my childhood growing up. My mother was overwhelmed with 7 children and 50 plus residents that we had living with us. And she just she was just depleted. So her message was always like, anytime I had a want or a need was like, it's too much, you're too needy. So I grew up very ashamed of my needs. So I became hyper independent. One of those people that when you're struggling to get your suitcase from the luggage above you in the plane, somebody offers to help, like, no, it's okay, I can do it myself, I'm fine.
Right.
You're just trained to be that way, to avoid the embarrassment or the humiliation of being rejected or shamed for having a need. So it's really important in a relationship to have what we call healthy interdependence.
Yes, interdependence is the key. Yeah, that is yeah. Now,
So,
another piece, if I may.
Sorry, say that.
I want another piece to that, if I may.
Yeah.
Because a lot of my clients have worked with a lot of women in business. The challenges for that independence is because for women, especially, I think in the business world, there's such a drive to succeed for a lot of women who've had this mindset that they daren't let anybody in because they might feel that their success will be taken away from them. So they become very dependent to protect their own success, their own energy. So when they're in relationship and dating, which is where a lot of work with clients is they don't know how to trust a man who won't take from them because they're fearful of losing their authority or what they've done. So it's not always about upbringing. Sometimes just about the way they've been trying to work in the world that they create this way of being because they think the only way they succeed is to be very, very protective of themselves, which I understand. And of course, there are women going through challenges in their, teens and adult life where they were abused or hurt by a man, where they don't trust a man, so they're going to be so independent because they don't want to put any sort of vulnerability or weakness that might be taken advantage of. So this topic could probably affect a lot of people out there. Just to be clear.
And you just put your finger on something that I want to comment on.
Sure.
And that is in the work environment. I'm just thinking now, they always say the saying was always like, behind every great man is a good woman. Now, the last few years, some people have turned that around, but that was the way. And I think what you're pointing to as well is a woman is afraid to bring in the man into her work environment or into her life because she's afraid of he gets the credit for it. It's like, oh, she's doing great because there's a man involved or it's a husband or whatever. So I think there is this sort of need to prove to oneself and prove that you did it all on your own and that you're not sort of hanging on somebody's coattails. You've actually achieved this on your own. And I think it happens more with women than with men because it's newer for women to get what they've achieved in the work environment.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend yesterday who's in the entertainment industry, and in her role, she said that's like because back when she was married, her and her husband, they would actually switch roles once in a while, like producing and directing. And the
Mhm.
thing was that when she produced, it was less of a weird look at people look at her weirdly. When she was directing, they would because there were so few women directors back then,
Mm.
whereas there were a lot more women producers. And so it was like depending on the role you're in, you may looked at like weirdly because somehow you don't look like the model of what you expect in that role. And so
Mm.
the challenge for women, like you're saying, definitely that the good thing with her and her husband, they had a really good setup where basically he would never take credit for stuff she did. But yes, in some cases, there are definitely women who've lost credit because the man sort of got um, chosen as being the hero and she didn't, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that is the challenge, absolutely.
Yeah, and even it's just sort of, I mean, I'm thinking back to when I was a child. It's so funny. I mean, I've always been a painter, an artist. I
Hmm.
drew so much when I was little, and I remember when a teacher would come over and want to sort of, do something to your drawing, and I'd be like, no, 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 show me on a separate piece of paper, because I wanted to take full credit for that. I didn't
Yeah,
want anybody saying, "Oh, well, it looks good because, Mrs. So and so came and helped you." I mean, this
right.
is a very small child. I remember that fierce determination to keep what was mine, mine,
Hmm.
and not to have it sort of,
Diluted,
but sorry, say that again?
like diluted.
Yes, exactly, diluted by somebody, not that the teacher would ever take credit for it, but it was the perception that it
Yeah,
wasn't just mine, that
right.
somehow I had, anyway, it's just so funny, I'm just thinking about this. But going back to, as I was saying, some of the women that I work with, they they've I mean, there's pride can come in it too. They want to sort of say, "I did this all on my own." But they don't even, I'm thinking one, client in particular that, it's 2 clients actually, that have small children, and they are, you know, they take all the responsibility for their children, the financial responsibility, everything, and
Yeah.
they are afraid to ask their either ex-husbands or ex-partners to contribute to the upbringing of the child.
Hmm.
They and I see it, and it's like, and I know their background to know enough about, there is this absolute fear of being too needy or asking for more than they deserved, or whatever it is, and it holds them back
Yeah.
from from a normal, I mean, you have a child together, that child is both people's responsibility, and the
Supposed
fact,
to be. Yes.
supposed to be, exactly. But the fact that, and it's not even like, I'm sure if they were to go to their ex-partner and said, I need more help, I need you to contribute more, whatever it is, there's
Mhm.
an opportunity for conversation, for agreements to be made. But I see this sort of like, almost this pride of, no, it's okay, I won't ask, I can do it all on my own. And it's not benefiting, certainly not benefiting them, it's not benefiting the child, and it's not giving their partner a chance to see how they can contribute.
Yeah.
So,
That's the thing.
that's why this is very up in
Yeah.
mind right now.
Well, that's the thing is, and because I talk about in the work and lessons I learned through my own journey was about moving from codependence through independence to interdependence, and
Exactly.
and just what we've been talking about as the examples. There's so many ways and things that happen to us, and we choose that can have us aligned to one of those that isn't necessarily the best choice. The reason I took interdependence because really it's recognizing that first of all, and I talk about this a lot in my work about how we're not incomplete people, we are whole people. So yes, we are independent of each other physically, so to speak. But the interdependence means there are things that I can do everything for myself, and there are things I love it if you did for me, sort of thing. That aren't things I will die if you don't do, but the things I love to have as additional. It's almost like living from the overflow. So when a relationship is built on interdependence, it's that energy of giving from a place of joy versus a place of lack, where you need something back in return, or you're putting a price on what you're giving. And
Mm.
so interdependence is actually very healthy, but it's not talked about a lot, which I'm glad we're having this conversation now, because it's needed to be talked about.
Absolutely, and some sort of, just to give some examples of, like, like when you are hyper independent in your relationship, you everything is viewed from, your perspective. What suits you, what you want out of the relationship, what can
Hmm.
you gain, how can you grow, and again, there's nothing wrong with all of that. but it can leave your partner feeling very sort of isolated, not
Yep.
involved, not
Separate.
separate. And we know all that we are separate as well as together. We know two
Right. Yeah.
individuals come together as the relationship, but alone, separate, not needed, not wanted, not desired. That your
Mhm.
feelings are important. All of these things can occur when we're hyper independent.
Yeah.
Um, but again, we also know the flip side, which is, we all know what dependence is,
We're
when
enmeshed.
we're
Yeah.
bullying, we're enmeshed, and we can't, as I say, can't make a move without our partner's approval or
Right.
permission, even in some extreme cases.
Well,
So, say that
yeah,
again.
say absolutely. I was going to say one thing about that independence thing. Some people, and it is not sex based. I mean, it's male and female in this conversation, have such a attachment to independence. 'Cause it's almost like a shield they wear, like a protection, because they're so afraid of letting anybody in. So it's not even about, I talked earlier about having someone's success being stolen or taken away or usurped. It's just about trusting enough to let somebody else in behind those walls you put up to protect yourself. So for some people, independence has been a survival mechanism. So it can be hard to let that down, you know?
100%. I mean, that was 100% my experience growing up, was not to become de dependent on anything,
Mhm.
on circumstances, life, or people. And I know it was 100% a survival mechanism. It was like this, because my experience of growing up was, you know, um, not very much money at all growing up. My mother's trying to survive, trying to provide for the children, no father involved. Again, very independent woman, very proud, and but we suffered for it. We definitely suffered for it because of this pride and this, I can do everything on my own. But then she started making a lot of money, and so we went from poverty to actually having money. And
Mhm.
but I remember the poverty, and so there was a part of me that was always afraid to get too used to the being, having a more affluent lifestyle. It was like,
Yeah.
when's the shoe going to drop again? When's it going to go? And the same in relationships. I remember being very, one of my first relationships, the second one actually, I became very codependent with a very narcissistic person. And
Okay.
the backlash of that was, I swore never to become dependent again on another human being. And so
Mhm.
therefore, then there was a lot of relationships where I was this hyper independent, couldn't get close to me. I wouldn't, the walls were up. Not that I was even probably aware of how thick those walls are. I was aware of them,
Yep.
but and they still exist. I'm the first to admit it. I'm still sort of very independent, but I'm aware of when it gets into unhealthy
Yeah.
independence, like unhealthy, like I don't need anybody. Because the reality is yes, we don't, we do have everything within us that we can cope, survive, and everything. But we're human, and we desire to connect, and we desire to, be with each other, and to want each other. Maybe not need, but certainly want, and to
Yeah.
have mutual exchange.
That's something for me. I think it's the invitation part. Is that inviting somebody into your energy, your space, your way of doing things. I was just thinking myself, is having been single for a long time, that I have um not created, but I've certainly become more comfortably independent. Like, because I've done everything myself. I haven't had anybody to sort of collaborate with or to share with or to overlap with. So I know, for me personally, just not predicting, but thinking about the advance when I'm in a relationship again, what things I need to be aware of that I don't like steamroll my partner with, because that's the way I always do things. And to realize, and this is the thing about interdependence, it's understanding the other person is different and realizing how to accommodate or to include them so you don't feel like you're ignoring them. Because the challenge with the independence, like you said earlier, it's almost like it's hard to be in a relationship because the other person doesn't really know where you stand, because energetically you're not with them. You're sort of standing almost like two independent, autonomous beings that have no real connection, which is why interdependence is that wholeness with connection, which is
Yes.
ideal.
Yeah, exactly. I know after my divorce, I again went back into that hyper independence. I've got to survive. I've got to, take care of my children and give them stability. And And so when I met my current partner, he was perfect for me because I was very clear. I knew the state of mind I was in. I knew what my priorities were at that moment, and that was to be stable and give my children a stable life. So I didn't want to be madly in love. I didn't want to be, in a
Yeah.
relationship. I didn't want to have a blended family. So I was very clear, and I said, "Hey, you want to be my friend? You want to walk alongside me?" But it was
There you
very much, I was very clear, and 15 years later, he's still walking alongside me. But we again, we live separately,
go. Hmm.
and and at one point, we keep talking about moving in together, but I think we both have got so used to having our own homes, our own environment, that we really love it the way it is.
Yeah.
Um, doesn't make
Which is
financial sense, but
no, but it also does indicate that their independence does work, and it's also about choosing to have a relationship as a bonus on top of that. So it is a different way of living, and that's the challenge. I mean, I know in my own history, my codependence was very much on display when I was in relationships. I was so enmeshed with my partner, and it was hard to disengage.
yeah.
And now the other side of being independent, I know the difference, the energetics of that. And so what you have with your relationship being in an interdependent relationship, meaning that it is two independent whole beings that you do your own thing. It's physically because you're doing geographically different too. That
Mm,
when you come together, you're choosing it as a conscious decision, which is really more powerful than just like, oh, they're there. It's
mhm,
like there's an intention with it, which is much more powerful. And for me, there's definitely that awareness that I'm not sure how much I want to be in the space of my partner all the time. It's like what you're saying. I love the idea of that, of having the choice to be together, but also having space to move to separate places. Even if it's just like some people I know who are married have separate bedrooms,
mhm.
but then they choose when they want to be together, even though they're in the same house, which creates that wholeness they want for each other and for themselves. There's ways of doing this.
Absolutely. I like I said, with Hootie and I, we're completely committed, completely monogamous. We see each other every day, and we
Mhm.
do take on sort of traditional roles in some, not because they're traditional roles. It just so happened that it sort of fell into that sort of areas of what we could contribute to the relationship.
Yeah.
And such as, I love to cook, I love to prepare food. um, uh, I'm a terrible baker, intentionally. I do not bake goods. But
Uh-huh.
he's an excellent baker, and he bakes, and so I do all the cooking of the food, and he bakes. And
Mhm.
then certain things, there's sort of, I'm more of the visual decorator artist side of me, so I take care of that side. So we're very, and then he's the technical help I need. So we're very clear about how we both really value what we bring into the relationship, besides obviously the respect, the love, the community, all that other yummy stuff that
Yeah.
goes into a relationship. There are certain um, what is that, strengths that we bring in that are different from each other.
Yeah.
And when you value each other's strengths and you allow that person to excel within their strengths and to be appreciated, and on so many levels. I mean, I held a dinner party last night for my book group, and I called my partner and I was like, I'm running out of time. And he came down, did the washing up for me, helped change the gas tanks, and just helped me get ready for this party that he wasn't included in. And
Mhm.
it's such a, and we really compliment each other and thank each other for the contribution we're making. Well, again, as I said, we're incredibly independent in the relationship, but we consider each other's feelings, and we
And
consider each other's,
yeah, which I love about that. It does show again back to the wholeness again, because codependency, which is the other extreme of the paradigm, so to speak, is really that place where you don't even know where you're like you and the other person begins. There's such a, and people think it's love, and I'm like, it's sticky. It's not particularly healthy. And so, as much as that when I was younger was fun at the time, I really feel like that's something I think it may be something that develops with maturity, to understand that there needs to be space between, so there's room. And the other part also, it's I think in some ways it keeps the relationship healthier and in a way like fresher, because there's space between the two partners to enjoy that need, that desire wanting to be together, which is a great thing about relationships as well, is having that love to be with each other. But you're not overdoing it in no sense. Like you have place to do that. And the way you complement each other, which I love about that, is that you're not codependent about it. You're being very healthy, saying, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not, and you do that, and you do this, and that fits together. It's such a great way of building relationship. So I think it's wonderful.
No, it really isn't. I mean, it's so funny. I was thinking when you were talking, because you were saying about maturity and things. And I remember very briefly between my marriage and my relationship with Hudi, I dated somebody, and he knew a friend of mine who was very dependent, very dependent person. And he'd say to me, "I want you to be more like her. She can't live without her man." Thinking, like, are you crazy? Like, because to me, when somebody is so dependent on you, it makes me feel like I could be any Tom, Dick, and Harry. It's not
Yeah,
me that you're into. You just need somebody so badly, and it's not about the person. It just becomes about your needs. And I,
yeah.
I personally find that a turn off. Well, I'll ask you. I mean, have you been in a relationship with a woman that's been so needy that you've almost felt like, hey, it's not me she wants. She just wants a body, a warm body, and somebody, you know, it doesn't take in the whole of you.
Right. Well, I've been in relationships like that, yes. However, I've got to be careful how I frame this.
I love it when I get some juicy information out of you, Barry. Come on.
Well, this is going back. This is going back in my 20s and early 30s. To be transparent, the relationships were such that the need wasn't both ways. But what happened was my need dissipated more than hers did, and it wasn't. I don't know if it was like she wanted a warm body. It wasn't about me. I think it was about me, but because what I brought, and this is not from an ego point of view, just the way it was. What I brought was so much better than what she'd had before in other relationships. She didn't want to let go of that, and so it became possessive. It became uncomfortable. Frankly, it wasn't healthy, and I felt really, really dysfunctional with that. So for me, there was absolutely a place of, I'll say disdain. Frankly, it was. I just couldn't stay there. I needed to back away. So looking back with hindsight now and knowing much better what relationships can be like, and recognizing the power of being an interdependent relationship, I didn't realize, because back then I had no clue. I was very naive and I didn't know how to treat it differently. So I didn't see it necessarily as I was just a warm body she was with. It may have been that, but my perception was, in my limited viewpoint back then, was that I couldn't have what I wanted because she was like clouding my judgment. It was messy, to be
Mm,
blunt. If that makes any sense.
yeah. Yeah, it does. It's an uncomfortable feeling when I mean, it's just natural. When somebody's smothering you, it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. When somebody is completely cold and detached, it's uncomfortable. So that's really
Right.
what we're talking about. Is again, I
Mhm.
was thinking about yesterday when I called Hootie up to say, I'm running out of time. It was just such a request, but I could have completely done it on my own. I mean, I know I could have, but it was a sort of, if you can, would you be available to help? And
Hmm.
and that's such a difference. That's an invitation. That's not a demand. It's not an expectation. It's not a I'll fall apart if you don't. It
Right.
was just simply that. And he could have said yes or no. And he was sweet enough to say, yes, I can, and came and
Mhm.
helped. So I know that it made me feel really good to have a partner that I could call upon in that moment of stress. And I know that it felt really good for him to
Yeah.
feel he could contribute and help and be appreciated. So it's such it works both ways.
Hmm.
I was in well, obviously in, in a few, no, actually, only a couple of narcissistic relationships,
Right.
but that feeling of being never taken into consideration,
Hmm.
never been asked, about plans or purchases or things like that. It was that sort of I'm going to make all these decisions unilaterally, regardless of even I don't think it would occur to him to even ask me on certain things. And that type, you end up feeling less than. You
Right.
feel it less important in the relationship, meaning that one person has the power in the relationship and takes the lead. And again, we've talked about this a lot, that power struggle, once that dynamic is in there, that's so damaging. So
Right.
the interdependence keeps a beautiful rhythm of appreciation and growth and support for both parties.
Hmm.
It's a total win-win for both people.
It is. It's so. How can I say this? It's almost like we want to be on the rooftops yelling out, "Interdependence is the way to go," because because it is such a powerful and expansive way of being in a relationship. And it was what, I mean, changed my life when I learned this lesson about the different levels, because codependency was the default, because that's what I learned from my parents. And that's another thing we're not going to mention deeply, but I will say it right here. For many of us, we grew up learning from our parents how a relationship looks, good, bad, or indifferent. And for many of us, we saw parents in a codependent relationship. That's what certainly was my experience. So the model I was taught when I was younger, thought that was the only way to be in a relationship, which was what clouded my choices and made that really challenging. So now looking back, having really discovered what interdependence is compared with codependence, is such a transformational experience. And frankly, I mean, I do sort of shout from the rooftops in a way that interdependence is the healthiest way of being in a relationship.
You know what I love about our conversations, Barry, is we grew up in such different environments,
Yep.
but we both, you know, developed sort of unhealthy relationship patterns based on
Hmm.
role models, and we've done a show on this in the past. But it really was. You're saying that your experience was to watch, lovely parents that meant well and everything, but you could recognize that they had a very codependent relationship with each other. Whereas
Yeah.
my experience was just a very independent woman. No man was, ever told her what to do. She lived her life on her terms, and so that was my role model. But I have that very strong influence from that. But again, that sort of abandonment from my father created that codependency of like yearning for partnership, but being really terrified of it at the same time because I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't have a healthy role model for what an interdependent relationship was.
Yep.
So it's fascinating to, as we said, we always say it's self-awareness, being aware of aspects that have influenced us and how it influences how we show up in relationships, and to check the validity of that.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that, I mean, frankly, so many people, or some of my clients I know, definitely have not really looked at their own upbringing to figure out what choices they've been making as adults, because they didn't realize that was what they're doing. And because we don't, and this is another one pet peeves, because there isn't relationship teaching skills in classes. They do sex education, but not relationship education, which doesn't make sense to me.
Exactly.
So we don't learn until we make enough mistakes to go, hang on, there must be a better way. And we find a book or a teacher or a class or a podcast that explains to people how a relationship can be. And it's because unfortunately for most of us, our parents didn't know better. So
Yeah.
they didn't do better. So, there's not to blame them, just saying that's the lesson we're learning now, how to supersede or to break the cycle of what was done before. So wishing everybody the best of luck with this.
Not saying anything bad with independent. I mean, we all want to be independent in this world. But at the same time, coming as I love how Barry says it, two separate people that are creating a third element, which is the relationship, and both
Absolutely.
giving from a place of strength and overflow into that relationship of joy and love and an appreciation for each other.
Yeah,
And
it's actually an abundant way of being in a relationship, to be honest.
exactly. Okay. I think we've been shouting enough about this subject from the mountaintops.
Thoughts? Yes, I think we are complete with this one.
Uh, I love our relationship, Barry. I'll say that much.
Thank you. Me too.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody, and we will see you all again next week. Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.